Well, the Gonzaga Bulldogs added a graduate assistant onto their staff for the 22-23 season, and that's not normally information that would be breaking news on the podcast, but this is a 40-year-old former Zag with 16 years of professional basketball playing experience, why he's here, what he brings to this roster, and more right here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Don't go away.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome to the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. I also want to thank all of you who have continued to make Locked On Zags your first listen of the day as we are here into the middle of August, the thick of the college basketball offseason. Also want to thank all of you who have checked out the show on YouTube. Very much means a lot to me. Over 840 subscribers at this point, very close to hitting our goal of 1,000. So if you have not done so yet, just go to youtube.com, search Locked On Zags, find the channel, hit that big subscribe button. All right, we got a lot of stuff going on today. We'll be joined by Jason Jordan of Sports Illustrated later in the show to talk about some recruiting updates. But for now, I want to talk about the newest addition to Gonzaga's roster, or at least to their coaching staff in a way. That is, of course, former Gonzaga legend JP Bautista, the Brazilian beast, one of the greatest transfers and almost certainly the greatest junior college transfer in program history. Bautista, for those who do not remember, who are newer Gonzaga fans, Bautista played at Gonzaga to the 2005 and 2006 seasons, again, after transferring over from junior college. He averaged 16 points and 8 rebounds in 62 games played for the Zags. Truly one of Gonzaga's first international icons. Rony Turioff really kind of takes the cake as being kind of the first one in that regard. They had some other ones prior to that and have obviously had a tremendous amount of success on the international recruiting trail since then. We're talking Kelly Olynyk, Kevin Pangos from Canada. We're talking Domantas Sabonis. We're, of course, talking Rui Hachimura, Filip Petrusev. There are tons and tons of great examples of international successes at Gonzaga. Batista was one of the first truly great ones. Of course, not a direct international to Gonzaga pipeline because he did stop at the junior college level, but came to Spokane, was excellent for 2 seasons, huge part of the success of those teams that had Adam Morrison on them. We talk so much about what Adam Morrison did in 2006, co-player of the year, averaged over 28 points per game. The reason Gonzaga had such a deep run, and of course the reason, the unfortunate collapse that happened in the UCLA game was in part magnified because of Morrison's response. But Batista was a huge part of that team, a huge reason that program had any level of success at that time, and he deserves to be celebrated for that. And now he's back. He's back in the program. He was teammates in college with both Brian Michaelson and Stephen Gentry, who are, of course, on staff with Mark Few currently. So there are now 3 players from that roster that are now coaching at Gonzaga. That's very, very cool continuity to see in the program. Certainly Gonzaga is not the only program that has former players come back to join as coaches, but it does seem to be a program that seems to really kind of thrive in that regard. We've seen, obviously, the coaching tree at Gonzaga has had a massive amount of success. You look at what Tommy Lloyd is doing at Arizona. You look at Leon Rice, who just got a 5-year extension at Boise State after leading them to a Mountain West championship, they had never won both the regular season and the Mountain West Conference Tournament championship, and they did both those things last year. Dan Monson, of course, not really out of the Mark Few coaching tree. He was a coach at Gonzaga before Mark Few took over, but Monson has had a ton of success both at Minnesota, which was kind of an up and down tenure, but also a lot of success at Long Beach State since then. And now we have JP Bautista on staff. Bautista's 16-year professional career. He spent it mostly in France, but he played a handful of different places as well. He put in some time in Lithuania. He put in some time in Mexico. He played a ton of seasons with Le Mans in France, had a massively successful career. Very many players have the ability to play till they're 40. He told Jim Meehan of the Spokesman Review, that he actually had offers to continue playing. He could have continued playing into his fourth decade on the planet. Chose instead to come to Gonzaga to take the opportunity to get his graduate degree and to be a part of the program. I want to acknowledge, and I haven't been working in higher education and college athletics for the last couple of years. I don't think the rules have changed here. There's a limit to how many coaches you are allowed to have who actually coach players. A graduate assistant is not a coach. So I see people talking about, oh, he's going to help out the big men and all of that. And he is, but there are limits to what he is capable of doing. He's not an official coach. He's going to sit on the sidelines. He's going to watch the games. He's going to be able to offer his input, certainly at least to the coaching staff. Hey, maybe Drew needs to do this. Maybe Anton needs to do this, whatever it may be. But there are limits to how much actual coaching he can do in this role. But I think the big things that he brings are obviously experience with Gonzaga, with experience with Coach Few, and then this wealth of knowledge from a entire life played in professional basketball, but also a career played overseas. I think that that's a big part of this as well. When you're looking at, most of the players on Gonzaga's roster are not going to play in the NBA. It feels like a lot of them are. It feels like many of them are capable of playing in the NBA, and certainly a lot of them will. But some of them will have actual NBA careers. Some of them might sniff the NBA, but will end up ultimately playing elsewhere, whether that's the G League or overseas. And some of them will just play overseas. They will finish their career at Gonzaga, and that is where they will go. And so for Bautista, who followed that route, he didn't really get a lot of serious looks as an NBA player, but he played until he was 40 in overseas in Europe and France, like we said. And so for him to be able to offer, like, hey, here are teams that treat their players well. Here are maybe teams that don't treat their players well. Here are opportunities where, this is a contract that maybe does make some sense for you. This is a contract that doesn't. And those are the kind of conversations that I expect Bautista will be having. That is not his only role on this team. He will do other administrative stuff. He will certainly learn about the coaching industry. That's kind of a part of what being a GA is. And he will certainly be around the team and be around the players and kind of get to impart knowledge in that way. But I think a lot of his kind of immediate roles will be kind of helping players make decisions about their futures while kind of just soaking up how to be a coach, how to work in college athletics, especially now. It's been a long time since he was in college. The rules are a lot different than they were back then. And certainly Michaelson and Gentry are familiar with what it was like back then and what it's like now. And so they can kind of help get him up to speed. But I think that'll be kind of an interesting transition for him to go through as well. And the last point I wanted to make, since we're talking about former players getting added onto staffs, I wanted to shout out Hayden Palmer, who joined the staff for the women's basketball team as a video coordinator. Hayden Palmer was the 5th Zag to ever get selected in the WNBA draft. Shout out to her for that. She never ended up playing in the WNBA, unfortunately, but she had a lucrative career overseas for the past decade or so. She was a third-team All-American while she was at Gonzaga. She was a 3-time overseas champion, played very, very well over there. Now she's back joining the staff, video coordinator. I believe it is the same or a similar role to what Gary Bell is doing for the men's basketball program. So again, shout out to the two of them, former Zags from around my era when I was a student at Gonzaga, both of them now back in the program. Gary's been there for a couple of years. Hayden rejoining the program this upcoming season. Another great addition to that staff is somebody who can kind of help a lot of the players on that team kind of learn what they want to do with their future, what countries maybe they should explore going to, where the best deals are, things like that. I think are valuable to have for a team of players who are mostly going to play professionally for the men's and women's teams. A lot of them are going to play pro, but again, especially in the WNBA, there's just so few teams that it's really, really hard to play professional basketball as a woman in the United States. And so there are plenty of opportunities overseas. And so Hayden can kind of help them figure out what opportunities may make the most sense going forward. All right, we're going to come back in the second segment. We're going to discuss a pair of former Gonzaga guards who are embarking on new professional journeys. But before we get there, I want to tell you all about BetOnline. College basketball may be deep into the offseason, but the MLB, WNBA, and MLS seasons are heating up into the summer months. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports information. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all of the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. They even have lines on coaching changes across every major sport, so even in the offseason, you can get your fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still locked on Zags, still chatting pro Zags and their next career moves. We talked about JP Bautista and Hayden Palmer coming back to the programs, their respective programs, to help out. Now we're talking about two guys who are moved on to different professional opportunities. First up is David Stockton. It's kind of a different professional opportunity, but it's also more of the same for Stocks. Stocks is joining the FIBA USA qualifying team for the Olympics. He was with this team back in February. They played 2 games at that time. He averaged 10.5 points, 3.5 assists, took 7 threes, knocked down 5 of them, looked excellent for Team USA back in February. He was named to the team again in July. They had a couple more pre-qualifying games in July. He could not play. He did not participate in those games because of a hand injury that kept him out of action. It was unclear if they were going to pursue him going forward. This roster changes a lot as players end up signing professional careers either in the United States, in the G League, or overseas. So it's always a little bit tricky to know whether a guy's going to stick around on this team or not. Stockton got reinvited again in August. He's back. He's back on the squad. He's set to participate with the team. They have 2 games coming up. August 25th, they're playing Uruguay in, again, a qualifying round for the FIBA tournament. They're going to play that game in Las Vegas on the 25th. I do not know if it will be televised or available to watch, but it should be fun if it is available. And then they're playing Colombia in Colombia on August 29th. So 2 games, 4 days apart, 1 in Vegas, 1 in Colombia. Heck of a trip for these guys. I'm excited to watch this team play. Eric Mika, a former BYU player, he's on the roster. Mac McClellan, who made some headlines playing really well in the G League for the Los Angeles Lakers. He was also a very, very good college player. He's on the roster. There's a couple other guys on the roster. One of them was McKinley Wright, who is the point guard at Colorado. Very, very good there. But he recently signed a training camp deal with the Dallas Mavericks, which makes me think that he is not going to participate on this team. A bummer for the overall roster. Probably not the worst news for David Stockton, considering McKinley Wright was a 6-foot point guard. I'm guessing him and Stocks were probably going to overlap in playing time, so this may clear up some more spots for David. Most people know David's story. He played at Gonzaga from 2010 to 2014. He was a backup player until his senior year when he stepped into a starting role, averaged 7.5 points, 4.2 assists, 1.5 steals per game. Of course, the son of legendary Gonzaga basketball player John Stockton, a family full of Gonzaga superstars in the Stocktons, and now David here, not only representing Gonzaga, but representing his country and really following in his father's footsteps by playing with the USA emblem on his chest. Very cool to see him back playing with the FIBA squad. And then next up, Eric McClellan, wanted to give him a shout out as well for signing a new contract. This is kind of the season for a lot of these new contracts. We've seen Gino Crandall sign a new deal. In Germany, we saw Stephen Gray hang up the cleats and his professional career. We saw Jordan Matthews sign a new deal overseas. We saw Admon Gilder sign a new deal overseas. We've seen a lot of guys signing new contracts. Now Eric McClellan is next up. He signed a new deal in Romania with BC SCM Timisoara. That is his new squad over in Romania. He has had a very eclectic professional career. He has played already in just the last half decade. He has played in Belgium, in Germany, in Greece, in Mexico, in Lithuania, in Austria, and last year he played in Cyprus, where he averaged 18 points and 6.5 rebounds. You know, when you're in your 20s and you're playing pro ball and you're living your dream, why not see as many places as possible? I'm sure some of those places were incredible and breathtaking, and the stadiums were nice, and the facilities were good, and the pay was good. And I'm sure some of those places, maybe that wasn't the case in some of those situations. That's just kind of how it works. Pro ball has got a really wide range of different atmospheres and environments, and I think it's really cool to get the opportunity to see as many of those as you possibly can. Certainly there's nothing wrong with spending your entire professional career in one place, but I think it's cool that McClellan has already seen and experienced so much in the last half decade since he left Gonzaga. Again, McClellan, very, very instrumental, Zag, in kind of keeping the streak alive. I don't think he often gets enough credit for this. He began his collegiate career at Tulsa. He transferred to Vanderbilt and then to Gonzaga, kind of the Rasir Bolton path of spending time at two other schools before you end up at Gonzaga. Some people are weary of that. Certainly, it has worked out quite well with Ross, and it worked out really well with McClellan as well. He was in a reserve role his first year at Gonzaga and then took off in his final season, the 2015-2016 season. Started all 36 games, 10.5 points, 3.2 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal per game, 34% from deep. He was a monster that year. They kind of let him take the reins and really run with the roster. Josh Perkins was on that team. Silas Melson was on that team. I believe that was the year that Perkins got kicked in the jaw, though. So McClellan was kind of the guy running the ship as the actual point guard. They had Kyle Dranganis, but they didn't have a ton of guard depth really on that roster. So Mac was counted on a lot to help that team. And there's a reasonable argument that they don't make the NCAA tournament. The streak ends without Eric McClellan. He dropped 20 points against St. Mary's in the WCC championship. If you recall, the Zags needed to win that game. It was the first time, it's really the only time that I can remember in my time following Gonzaga where they really needed to win that game in the WCC championship in order to secure a bid in the NCAA tournament. Mac dropped 20. They beat St. Mary's. They went into the NCAA tournament as an 11 seed, beat St. John's in the first round, and then blew the doors off Utah, number 3 seeded Utah. Everybody talks about Domantas Sabonis in that game, and of course, he had 19 points, 10 rebounds against Jakob Poeltl, who was one of the best college basketball players of all time, a guy that people did not expect that Sabonis would absolutely crush him, and so that's what people talk about. But frankly, Eric McClellan led the team in scoring. He had 22 points in that game. He has 9 of 12 from the field. Magnificent, hyper efficient, getting to the rim, slicing through the defense. He did everything you could possibly ask of him in that game. And while they won that game pretty handily, you could make an argument that without Mac, it's at least a much, much closer game. Tremendous basketball career for Eric McClellan, not just at Gonzaga. He's played very, very well professionally. I'm excited to see what he is able to do in Romania next season. All right, we're going to come back in the third and final segment. We're going to be joined by Jason Jordan of Sports Illustrated. We're going to discuss Wesley Yates, 2023 prospect who listed the Zags in his top 9. We're also going to discuss a 2024 guard prospect who the Zags are trying to steal away from UCLA right after this. All right, welcome back. Segment 3 here on the Locked On Zags podcast, joined again by Jason Jordan of Sports Illustrated. Before we get into that, I would like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Jason, in the last week, 2 Gonzaga targets have listed the Zags amongst their top list. Number 1 is Wesley Yates. We talked about Yates last week, kind of talked about how we didn't think a decision was coming super soon for him. He still had a handful of visits he wanted to take. I'm guessing not a lot of that has changed, but we did see him release a top 9 list. It included the 3 schools he'd already visited: Auburn, Stanford, UW. It also included LSU, Texas, which I think were schools we were thinking he was planning to visit. I'm curious, looking at the list with a couple other additions there, if there was any schools that kind of surprised you that showed up on his list.
No. I mean, I've been talking to him over the summer, so those 9 are about what I would have imagined. You know, the list of 9 is always interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, he talked about getting out to you guys for a visit. Talked about LSU and I believe Arkansas. So take those visits as well. So, I don't think this is over soon. When I say soon, I don't mean in the next month and a half, 2 months, which you know, relatively far out in the recruiting world.
Yeah, exactly.
Fans that are holding their breath, right? So, I don't. I think he'll let it play out. I think he wants to go on visits, and I know that he doesn't know. You know, I don't. You know. At this point, there's always he's leaning this way. It's kind of a lean. Nah, I can tell you, I don't think he knows.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's like you said, he's only taken a third of the visits that he's probably going to take or something like that. So it's good to not know. It's good. You shouldn't know yet. You should go figure it out. Go talk to some of those other schools. Hopefully he has an absolute
You'd be surprised though. You'd be surprised though, because a lot of the guys, they do know, and they just go for, in the back of their mind, they're like, I'm gonna do a little stuff, but I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go to this football game that I really want to see.
Sure, yeah.
Alabama,
don't blame them for that.
that part,
So sticking on Yates real quick before we move on to the other guy, I kind of just curious. We talked a little bit about his game, and certainly he's a high level scorer. He can score multiple different ways. Looking at what Gonzaga has done just with their offense, particularly in the last few years, that they've kind of gotten out in transition more, really pushed the pace a lot. We talked a handful of times about Dusty Stromer and kind of how he fits well into what Gonzaga likes to do offensively. Do you feel similarly about Yates were he to come to Spokane?
Yeah, even more so. In his case, just watching him at Peach, he, like I said, he was one of the most impressive guys I saw at Peach Jam. And one of the things that really stood out to me is his patience on the offensive end. Like he's at a gym packed. I remember he played against CP3, and they got the three-headed monster, Aiden Holloway, G.G. Jackson, and Robert Dillingham. And you would think that's a game he's going to press it a little bit and force some things and really hunt his shot. But he was very, very patient offensively. Like he didn't force anything. He would just kind of stay off to the side and let the play develop. But when it was his time, he was coming around that screen so hard and ducking under on tucks and different things like that. And he really fought to get open. So I think that would serve him well in that system for sure. And I know that he knows that.
Yeah, Gonzaga does a really good job with off the ball guards. That's always been a big strength of theirs. So if he can come off screens well and stuff, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Last guy I want to talk about today with you, Jason, Jamari Phillips, class of 2024. I am always surprised when I see a kid that far out have a list of just 6. That feels a little, maybe a little preemptive, but hey, if you know, I guess that's okay. Gonzaga's on the list. UCLA's on the list. He talked extensively about how he grew up as a UCLA fan, was a huge, he was just a huge fan of the program, lived in LA area. Then he started following Gonzaga when Jalen Suggs came to campus. So of course I like to make the connection here that perhaps Jalen Suggs, who already quite famously defeated UCLA once, maybe he will have an impact on defeating UCLA again here. I don't know. Again, this is probably not one that's close to over, but I'm curious if you've kind of got, first of all, if you've just got a sense of what kind of player he is, how much you've really seen him play.
Saw him play a couple times this summer. I think he had a really big summer with PG Elite. Obviously, people saw the game on TV in Vegas, but he'd been doing that all year. I think the thing that really separates him is something that is a little uncommon, and that's his mid-range game. Because you have to respect it, because you know that he can get to the cup, and when he gets to the cup, he's going to finish very efficiently in an athletic manner. We'll say it like that. But his ability to stop in the mid-range and pull up, the stop and pull up is really one of the most dangerous parts of his game, because he knocks that shot down very, very efficiently. And I think that is what opens up everything on the offensive end for him. He's one of the best two-way guards in that class. I mean, he really competes on the defensive end. He plays with a lot of fire and, an unrelenting motor on the defensive end. So, he really likes to compete on that end. And I that's always impressive to me, because I don't see it as much, if I'm being very honest. That's true. A lot of top players tend to rest on defense, if we can be all the way honest. So, seeing a guy that really brings it on the defensive end is definitely something that stands out.
And that's huge. I mean, for Gonzaga, obviously they have one of the best, I think, athletically defensive guards currently in college basketball, in Hunter Sallis. And so certainly having another player, Sallis is going to be a long gone by the time Phillips would come to Spokane, but that kind of player is always valuable to have just in general. Looking at his list, a lot of West Coast teams. Obviously, we talked UCLA, Gonzaga. We also got Oregon on the list, and then Texas Tech, Kansas, Louisville. Again, he said he grew up a UCLA fan. Do you think that they're kind of the front runner here, or is this one of those things where it's kind of anybody's guess, as it's still so far out?
I think it's far out. I think when you have a dream school and, you grew up in LA, I think, do they probably have a little bit of an edge? Sure. But I did a story about a month ago about why dream offers don't they don't often materialize,
Sure.
So, and, it's about the fit and the opportunity. So,
Right.
He's not going to pass that up just to wear UCLA across his chest. Like, these kids mature, and so they're able to put it into perspective. But yeah, is it cool to have your dream school rolling out the triple red carpet? 100%.
Absolutely. Jason, thank you so much for coming on. I really got excited. We got a chance to talk about these two guys. We'll see if we end up talking about Wesley Yates again and again and again. But hopefully as we get a little bit closer and kind of see what these guys' decisions makes, I'm excited to have a chance to have you on again to kind of talk about some more of the recruiting updates as they come through.
For sure, man. Always happy to be here.
All right, that is going to do it for me today. Thanks again to Jason Jordan for coming on the show to give us some recruiting updates. Don't forget to check out my written content at scorezagscore.com and look out for another very fun guest who is planning to join the podcast later this week, right here on the Locked On Zags podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube as well. Finally, I want to thank you all again who have made Locked On Zags your first listen of the day. Locked On WCC doesn't exist yet, but you can get more informed on the West Coast happenings by making Locked On Pac-12 your second listen of the day. Host Spencer McLaughlin and my local experts of Locked On take you across the Pac-12 in 30 minutes, 5 times per week. All right, thank you all for listening, and go Zags.